Our business editor, Ross Greenwood, is live with us in Sydney. He's been watching along as this grilling has been getting underway. Ross, keen for your take on where things are at so far. We've heard the senators there really not beating around the bush, with Mr Lowe being forced to defend his personal performance and the RBA's rates decisions. But Mr Lowe not giving an inch there, insisting that although raising rates are unpopular, he firmly believes that it's the right thing to do for the economy at the moment. But if anything, as you've been pointing out on your program, Ross, a real criticism is that the bank should have decided to lift rates a whole lot sooner.
Yeah, it's one issue that hasn't been raised really by this committee so far, and that is not necessarily that the interest rate rises are damaging the economy. As Philip Lowe has indicated, the Reserve Bank is not seeking to smash Australia's economy into recession. But the real answer is whether really they have defeated inflation. As he's pointed out also, if people start to claim the inflation rate currently, 7.8%, as their rights to wage claims in the future, then Australia's economy will be in real recession, and it could knock it off what he describes as the narrow path to try and avoid some sort of economic downturn or potentially even a recession. But he does certainly defend the Reserve Bank and the board's decisions, and indeed says, look, it's not just me. There's 9 of us in that room that come to a consensus decision. But the key thing he also indicated is that he is the one who often makes the strongest recommendation to that board about where the interest rates should land. Now, Philip Lowe, as you say, Ash, is under significant pressure right now. His term expires in September this year. Many people suggest it will not be extended. And indeed, he says, though, he's not going anywhere. He is determined to keep doing this job until at least September this year. And then it will be up to the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, as to whether he is appointed afterwards. But the other aspect of this is also that he does talk about the problems if inflation in Australia is really out of control. And one of the things he talks about is that inflation ultimately, if it remains, will be linked with higher interest rates and therefore higher unemployment. And he says one of his ambitions out of his term as the governor, and indeed during this interest rate rising cycle, is to try and have Australia's economy come to a soft landing where the unemployment rate doesn't rise significantly from these current record lows that people are enjoying, and therefore people do not get disrupted, because he says that would be the worst outcome for Australia and our economy.
And Ross, interesting when it comes to the politics around all of this, Mr Lowe was very keen to stay in his own lane. He acknowledged the Treasurer doesn't comment on rates policy, so he said he wouldn't be commenting on the Treasurer's fiscal policy, something the Liberal Senator we heard there, Jane Hume, describing as being a very generous comment, considering comments we've heard from the Assistant Treasurer, Stephen Jones, this week about the RBA's performance. We heard the Green Senator run through a list of criticisms about Philip Lowe's performance in recent years. What did you make of that? Are the criticisms levelled at Philip Lowe, are they justified in your view?
I think many of them are. I think really this is about communications. And one of the key areas of communication that the Reserve Bank and indeed Philip Lowe personally have been subject to in recent days is about a private briefing he gave to Australia's senior bankers in the fixed interest markets after the most recent rates decision. Now, Philip Lowe chose not, as he has done in previous years, to address the National Press Club and indeed chose to go and give this private briefing to bankers. It was hosted by Barrenjoey. He did explain this by saying that he had decided to make a change in his schedule and effectively to try and address Parliament through the Senate inquiries and also at the House of Representatives inquiry that he'll front on Friday this week before giving any public address. But what he then says is he then found a gap in the diary and gave this briefing to bankers at Barrenjoey's conference. Now, there's nothing out of ordinary with that. That is absolutely as the Reserve Bank Governor should do. The problem was timing. The issue here was that he had addressed these bankers before he'd addressed Parliament, and indeed even before the latest monetary policy statement had come out. Money market interest rates moved as a result of that. He has said in the future there would be no briefings to bankers before that statement of monetary policy came out. So in other words, he's conceded he got his timing wrong. So there's one criticism. But in many cases, my criticisms of the Reserve Bank Governor have all been about communication. And the interesting thing is he took advice that he'd communicated too much. I would suggest the real problem here is the quality of the communication, not necessarily the amount of it.
Ross Greenwood, really appreciate your analysis. Thank you. Yes, the optics of the bankers' lunch clearly an issue for Philip Lowe.